Okay, let's dive straight into Leviticus chapter 4.
Right. This chapter, it gets really specific about one particular thing. Sin offerings.
But not just any sin, right? We're talking about unintentional sin here.
Exactly. When someone sins, but they didn't actually mean to, the text lays out how atonement was supposed to happen in that context.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to get under the hood of this system. What happens if you slip up, break a rule without intending to?
Yeah, who brings what kind of offering? What's the actual process?
And you go, what does all this incredible detail tell us about how seriously they took unintentional sin and how forgiveness worked back then?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is the basic premise right there at the start. If someone sins unintentionally, does something the Lord commanded not to do, well, they're guilty, period.
Even if they didn't mean it.
Even if they didn't mean it or maybe didn't even realize they'd done it at first, the act itself creates guilt.
That really sets the tone, doesn't it? Guilt, even without intent, it's about the act itself violating the command.
It is. And then the text immediately breaks it down, like how different people deal with this specific kind of guilt, starting right at the top.
With the anointed priest.
Yeah, the anointed priest. And his unintentional sin is treated really seriously. The text says it brings guilt on the people.
Wow. So his mistake impacts everyone. Big responsibility.
Huge. His actions, even accidental ones, have these, community-wide ripples.
So for him, what's the offering? Must be significant.
It is. A young bull without defect. That's a major offering, reflecting his status and the seriousness of the situation.
Okay, a bull. And the process, you mentioned it's detailed.
It's incredibly detailed. So the priest brings the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting. He lays his hand on its head.
That's the identification part, right? Transferring the sin symbolically.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Identification or connection. Then he slaughters it right there before the Lord. But then things get quite distinct for this offering.
Okay, how so? The blood?
Exactly, the blood handling. Some of the bull's blood is taken inside the tent of meeting into the holy place.
Whoa, inside the tent, not just on the outside altar.
Right, that's a key difference for the priest offering, and we'll see it again for the communities. He takes it inside, dips his finger in the blood, and sprinkles it 7 times before the Lord, right there in front of the curtain, the one separating the holy place from the most holy place.
7 times. That number always seems important, like completion or perfection.
Often, yeah. Suggests a really thorough cleansing right there in the sacred space. And he also put some blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense. It's the smaller gold altar inside the tent.
So blood definitely goes into the sacred tent for the priest's sin.
Definitely. Then the rest of the blood, that gets poured out at the base of the big altar outside, the altar of burnt offering.
Okay. And the fat, like the internal fat, kidneys, liver part.
Ah, yes. That's always removed and burned on that big outdoor altar. That's pretty standard for many offerings. Seems like the choice portion offered up.
Got it. But what about the rest of the bowl? The meat, the hide, everything else?
Now, that's the other really distinct part for the priest's sin offering. The entire rest of the bull hide, flesh, head, legs, innards, everything has to be carried completely outside the camp.
Outside, like away from everyone.
Totally away. To a specific, ceremonially clean place where they dump the ashes from the altar. And there, it's completely burned up on a wood fire.
Wow. So it's not eaten, not used, just completely removed and destroyed outside the camp.
Seems like it. It might symbolize a complete removal of the sin or the sin-bearing sacrifice because it affected the community and the sacred space itself, like a total purge.
A very powerful image. Okay, so that's the top priest. What if the whole community messes up unintentionally? The text says even if they weren't aware at first, they're guilty once it comes to light.
Right. Same principle. Guilt isn't just about knowing you messed up. When they do realize it, the assembly, the whole group, brings, guess what?
Let me guess. A young bull.
You got it. A young bull without defect, same as the priest. Shows the seriousness, right? The collective sin is treated like the high priest's sin in terms of the offering.
And who lays hands on it this time? The whole crowd.
Probably not practical. The text says the elders of the community lay their hands on the bull's head. They represent the people.
Makes sense. And the ritual.
It's described almost identically to the priests. The anointed priest handles the blood.
Okay.
Takes some into the tent of meeting, sprinkles it 7 times before the curtain, puts some on the horns of the incense altar inside.
Just like for his own sin offering.
Exactly. Pours the rest of the blood at the base of the outdoor altar, burns the fat on that altar.
And the rest of the bowl.
Same deal. Taken completely outside the camp and burned entirely on the ash heap, just like the priest's bull.
So, identical process, blood inside, 7 sprinkles, carcass burned outside.
Pretty much. And the text explicitly says the priest makes atonement for them and they will be forgiven.
Mm.
So collective unintentional sin, even initially unknown, gets the highest level of ritual treatment.
Okay, so priest and community bowl, blood inside, burned outside. What about the next level down? A leader, like a tribal chief or someone important, but not the anointed priest.
Right, a leader. If he sins unintentionally and finds out he's also guilty, but his offering is different.
Not a bowl this time.
No, it's a male goat without defect. Still valuable, but, a step down from a bull.
Okay, a male goat. He brings it, lays his hand on its head, slaughters it at the usual place near the big outdoor altar.
Yep, but here's the big change. The blood handling.
Ah, okay. What happens with the goat's blood?
The priest takes some blood with his finger, but he only puts it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, the big one outside.
So not inside the tent?
Correct. No blood goes inside the tent for the leader's unintentional sin. It stays outside, applied only to the main altar. The rest of the blood is poured out at the base of that same outdoor altar.
That's a significant difference. Suggests the sin, while needing atonement, didn't quite impact the inner sanctuary the same way.
It seems that way. The atonement happens at the main place of sacrifice, but doesn't require that deeper ritual involving the tent itself.
And the fat.
Burned on the altar, just like the others. The text compares it to the fat of the fellowship offering.
What about the rest of the goat's body? Does it get taken outside the camp too?
Interestingly, this chapter doesn't say that for the leader's goat. It focuses on the blood and fat. Other parts of Leviticus suggest that some sin offerings, perhaps these ones, could actually be eaten by the priests in a holy place. So, a different outcome than the complete destruction of the bowls.
Okay, that makes sense. Finally, what about just a regular person, a member of the community?
An everyday Israelite, yeah. If they sin unintentionally, find out about it, they're guilty too. Need an offering.
And they get an option, don't they?
They do. Either a female goat without defect or a female lamb without defect, perhaps making it a bit more accessible for an individual.
Female goat or lamb. And the process. Similar.
Very similar process for either animal. Bring it, lay a hand on its head, slaughter it where the burnt offerings are usually slaughtered.
And the blood, like the leader's offering.
Exactly like the leaders. Priest takes blood with his finger, puts it on the horns of the outdoor altar of burnt offering, pours the rest out at the base of that altar.
So again, no blood inside the tent for an individual's unintentional sin.
Nope. Stays outside at the main altar.
And the fat gets burned on the altar too. The text mentions it being a pleasing aroma to the Lord.
Yes, it does. And the outcome is the same stated purpose. The priest makes atonement for their sin, and they will be forgiven.
Right. So if we pull all this together, what's the big picture? We see this like tiered system, different animals, different rituals, all depending on who sinned unintentionally.
Absolutely. It's clearly stratified. The most intense ritual, the bull, blood inside the tent, the 7 sprinklings, the carcass completely removed outside the camp that's reserved for the anointed priest and the whole community.
The ones whose actions have the biggest collective impact or touch the holiness of the sanctuary more directly.
Seems to be the idea. Their unintentional sins require this deeper, more extensive ritual involving the sacred space itself and this complete removal.
Whereas for a leader or just an individual, it's a different animal, a goat or a lamb, and the blood ritual is confined to the main outdoor altar. Atonement happens, but it doesn't involve that penetration into the tent.
Exactly. And it's not just random variation. It seems to reflect a hierarchy of responsibility and maybe the perceived ripple effect of the sin. A priest's mistake, or a community mistake, apparently pollutes things or has consequences on the scale that an individual's mistake doesn't, requiring a different, more potent form of ritual cleansing.
So it really underlines how interconnected things were believed to be: the people, the leadership, the sanctuary, the divine commands. Breaking a command, even accidentally, disrupts that connection.
And needs a specific, prescribed fix to restore it. It shows how seriously all sin, even unintentional, was taken, and that there was a structured way back into right relationship through these sacrifices and the priest's actions.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into Leviticus 4. We've seen this incredibly detailed, scaled system for dealing with unintentional sin.
Yeah, the sacrifice, the ritual, it all changes depending on whether it's the priest, the whole community, a leader, or just an individual member.
And the core takeaways seem pretty clear. Guilt happens even if the sin wasn't on purpose. Atonement is necessary.
And there's this very specific, divinely given path to forgiveness through sacrifice, handled by the priest, with the details really mattering, based on the sinner's status and the sin's impact.
It really emphasizes the need for a mediator and a prescribed system.
It does. So maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on. This text lays out these really strict requirements, these elaborate rituals, even for things people didn't mean to do or maybe didn't even know they did wrong at first.
What is that intense focus on fixing unintentional problems? With all these varying levels of seriousness in the ritual, tell us about the underlying ideas here, about maybe human fallibility, how easily things can go wrong, the pervasive nature of sin's effects, and just how absolute the need was for this specific system of atonement to bridge that gap. It paints a complex picture, doesn't it?